In our previous episode, we explored the decline of Numenorean society and the erosion of values which had ensured their position as the most powerful kingdom on Middle-earth since the coming of the Host of the Valar during the War of Wrath. Despite this moral decay, the state of the Numenorean army remained undimmed, only now lacking in the wisdom which has and always will be required to temper the will of any such warlike culture. In the end, it would be this unfortunate combination of arrogance and self-aggrandizement which allowed a new Dark Lord to rise, and the comfortable existence of the Numenoreans to be washed away beneath the tides of their own hubris. The good news is that the tides of your hubris will be easier than ever to sail upon when it comes to creative writing, because we've a special offer on a powerful tool to aid you, our sponsor, World Anvil. This program connects everything you need to invent an interlinked fictional world. You can fill it with endless content and adventure without losing focus or structure using World Anvil's tools. For example, create a wiki-like database of the world's history, people, creatures, places, factions, relationships, and just about anything else you need to keep straight. That's great not just for creating a consistent world, but also for allowing collaborators to write content into your world too, easily staying up to date with what everyone else has contributed. Aside from writing, explore your new world via a game of D&D or loads of other tabletop systems, with all the data you need to play being tracked and updated within the program. From there, new content in the world will emerge through your own gameplay, and you can add that straight back into World Anvil to grow the lore ever more. You can check out World Anvil via our link in the description. If you use our code WIZARDS, they'll give you 51% off a yearly subscription, so support our channel and your imagination by taking a look. By the time the rule of Ar-Pharazon misguidedly came to be, the Second Age of Middle-earth had found itself in an era of intense uncertainty. Although Sauron had once more been able to raise great armies and establish himself as the Lord of Mordor, his status was little more than that of a paper tiger. Moreover, while the elves remained a formidable force in and of themselves within the waning days of the Second Age, they could still be overwhelmed by the vast tide of orcs which Sauron could draw to his side. However, if Sauron had engaged in such an assault, the Numenoreans would be obliged to intervene, not for their love of the elves, a love which had long since withered, but due to their inherent sense of superiority. The Numenoreans could brook no challenge to their might. Such was the intensity of their arrogance that should Sauron reach out to crush their long-deserted allies, they would come in such might so as to render resistance moot. This uneasy stalemate was to come to a sudden end with the coming of the mightiest army of the Edain which had ever and would ever be assembled. As the Dark Lord had begun to assume further titles which he believed would befit the station of a being of his majesty and splendour. Amongst these newfound titles were the Lord of the Earth and King of Men. These were mere titles and meaningless words, yet their impact upon the continent of Middle-earth was as momentous as the waves which sunk Beleriand in the end. Ar-Pharazon had been described as a man of great beauty and stature after the image of the first kings, indeed in his youth not unlike the Edain of old in mind also. Although he may have looked every inch a king, he lacked that very essence of what it meant to be a true ruler, and for this his people would suffer dearly. Therefore, upon hearing that another bore such titles in direct opposition to his own rule, combined with the attacks Sauron had begun to launch upon Numenorean settlements upon the coast of Middle-earth, the king lurched unsteadily into action. Although the chronicler does not detail the actual numbers involved in the maritime landings of the Numenoreans, the sheer might of the army of men was truly astonishing. For as Ar-Pharazon crested upon Middle-earth's shores in Umbar in SA 3261, at the head of the Numenorean host, he gazed upon Mordor, truly confident that there was no other possible outcome but that of a Numenorean triumph. The Edain soon departed the harbour city and made toward the plains of Gorgoroth. Yet unlike their ancestors in the Battle of the Gwythlo, no great battles were to be fought, and no honour in battle was to be won. When Sauron's blighted hordes beheld the size of the force arrayed against them, the Dark Lord's armies simply abandoned him, unwilling to be annihilated at the hands of the mightiest warriors of their age. As such, Ar-Pharazon was able to simply walk into Mordor, allowing Sauron to truly comprehend the true strengths and weaknesses of the race of men. For rather than flee from their might once more in the hopes he could build a force capable of matching the might of Numenor in the field, Sauron now knew that Numenor's demise must come from within that fair isle rather than without. To that end, the successor of Morgoth allowed himself to be captured, throwing himself at the feet of the King of Numenor and begging forgiveness. Had it been the king's predecessor, the wise seer Tar-Palantir, the Dark Lord may have been slain in that moment. But Ar-Pharazon was a man who was deficient in foresight and abundant in arrogance. Such was his hubris, his unshakable belief in his own power and supposed wisdom, that he thought that in that instant that he could now contend with a Maiar and shackle him in some lowly cell upon his island home. As a result, Sauron was brought to Numenor in chains, which led many within the king's court to believe that the great foe of the race of man had been laid low. Although Sauron was to initially feign his unhappiness at this development, he secretly delighted in his own cunning, now believing victory was all but assured. After a mere handful of years, Sauron's cunning and intense charisma allowed him to rise from a lowly prisoner within the dark pits of Numenor to an advisor at the right hand of the king. Such was his influence upon the courts of Ar-Pharazon that in the kingdom founded by Elros Half-Elven himself, it was not long before many within the court were openly worshipping the previous Dark Lord Morgoth. It is he whose name is not now spoken, for the Valar have deceived you concerning him, putting forward the name of Eru, a phantom devised in the folly of their hearts, seeking to enchain men in servitude to themselves. For they are the oracle of this Eru, which speaks only what they will. But he that is their master shall yet prevail, and he will deliver you from this phantom, and his name is Melkor, Lord of all, giver of freedom, and he shall make you stronger than they. Sauron to Ar-Pharazon. In spite of the corruption which lay at the festering heart of what had once been a kingdom and a people of such purity of purpose, the island prospered. However, this prosperity came at a dreadful cost. As the hearts of the people of Numenor were internally poisoned, their outward actions began to reflect this taint. The middlemen, who had once been treated as long-lost kinsmen, if never of the same station as that of the Numenoreans, were hunted, captured and enslaved. Many were brought to Numenor in chains, not unlike Sauron had once been carried to the island. Yet their end was far more cruel, for many were slain with the utmost indignity as sacrifices to Morgoth. The symbolic moral destruction of the kingdom came with the felling of the beautiful white tree of Nimloth, whose lumber was used to christen the mighty temple of Morgoth with a pyre of unholy flame. This structure, which Sauron had raised within the very heart of the capital of Armenelos, emphasized the dark descent of these days, for it was mighty in form, yet rotten to the very core of its intent. The temple was composed of a mighty dome, 500 feet across and 500 feet high, with walls 50 feet thick at the base. Although the roof of the dome was covered with a glorious silver facade, this quickly charred and blackened due to the smoke of the ritualistic rites, evidencing in microcosm the moral decay and decline of Numenor. The chorus of screams which oft emerged from its lofty interior were an intermingling of the human sacrifice of middlemen and the faithful alike, at the decree of its high priest Sauron. The Lord of Andúnii in these days, Amandil, recognized the vast corruption within the very being of his people, and as such withdrew to Ramenna. This last bastion of the faithful had become a fearful backwater, due to the ongoing persecution of those who now dwelt there, begun years earlier, and intensified under the callous cruelty of Sauron. This persecution was to intensify, as the spectre of death loomed ever larger upon the arrogant Ar-Pharazon. As time passed, Ar-Pharazon leaned more and more heavily on the advice of his immortal counsellor Sauron, who advised the monarch to make war upon the Valar themselves and seize the immortality he so desired. Consequently, a mighty fleet was assembled over a period of 9 years in order to steal for mankind the immortality which it had never been intended to possess. However, Amandil had become aware of the plans of his foolish liege and spoke with his son Elendil, seeking counsel from him. The final course he deliberated upon was to take the route of his ancestor Eärendil and beg for the forgiveness of the Valar in person. As such, he engaged in a ruse whereby he and 3 close servants sailed east as if they were making their way to the coast of Middle-earth, before altering their course. The ship would then head west so Amendil could potentially save his home from the great downfall which now awaited it. In the end, this journey came to naught, for Amendil and his ship were never seen nor heard from again. As a result, Elendil assumed the leadership of the faithful, and prepared his people so that they could survive the doom which now awaited them. Just prior to this immense undertaking, the dome of the great Temple of Morgoth was cracked as lightning unleashed by Eru himself came down upon the temple. However, the Dark Lord remained unbowed before such a show of might, and placed himself upon the top of the dome, defying the lightning, defying Eru, and in the eyes of his followers becoming a god. By SA 3319, the great armament, as it had become known, was readied, and Ar-Pharazon boarded his flagship, Al-Carandas, and the fleet departed. After braving the cruel seas, the host landed upon the shore of Aman, making their camp upon the green hillock of Tuna, which inspired great fear in the Valar, who now worried for the safety of the Valinor. However, the Valar were forbidden from killing the men who had now invaded their shores, nor could they bring to bear any form of force. As such, Manwë, the chief of the Valar, called upon Eru Ilúvatar to bring relief to the denizens of the Undying Lands. Ilúvatar duly answered, opening up a great chasm in the sea between Numenor and Aman, which swallowed the great armament, entrapping them within the Caves of the Forgotten, where they would remain until called upon during the Dagor Dagorath. Numenor itself was subsequently drowned in the great wave caused by the opening of the Abyss, which also destroyed the body of Sauron, depriving him of the ability to assume a fair form ever again. Ilúvatar would go on to break the world, changing it once more, turning Arda from a flat to a round shape, and removing Aman and Tol Eressëa from the world forever, so no mortal sailor could ever reach the true west for the final declining days of Middle-earth. Yet hope remained, as not all of the citizens of Numenor were lost to the flood. However, this is a tale for our next video on the history of the Second Age, which will bring to an end our series on the Second Age through the War of the Last Alliance. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the efforts of the new Dark Lord to establish his dominance over all of Middle-earth, but we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.